thanks everyone for coming. Super excited about the panel today. It's actually a fire chat talk because one of the panelists couldn't make it due to a flooding situation. But super excited to have Will here. So maybe, Will, just to start with, can you give a quick introduction to the audience about, mainly focusing on what you've been doing up till now, maybe talk a little bit about Alchemy and what Alchemy is up to, and maybe talk about your journey into account abstraction too.
That's a great place to start, and thanks for having me, Alokik and Circle team. My name is Will Hennessy. I'm product lead at Alchemy for our account abstraction products, and I think that's a great way to start off is just by explaining like, why do I work on account abstraction in the first place, and how did I end up here? So 3 years ago, I was working at Google. I was a product manager on the voice assistant, dreaming about the future of artificial intelligence. And believe it or not, I got bored. And so I started to get into crypto. And at the time, it was DeFi summer. And all of these apps and DAOs were taking off. And some of them were using Gnosis Safe at the time for their treasuries. And Gnosis Safe was actually, in many ways, the earliest instance of account abstraction, because it's a smart contract account that allows you to sign transactions with different signature methods and submit them to relayers so that the owner of the smart contract account doesn't actually have to pay gas themselves. And so I used Gnosis Safe to build out an app for payroll for DAOs, where members of the multi-sig could vote on compensation packages and automatically pay out contributors through automated payments on the smart contract. And that was a lot of fun, but it was also hard, because the infrastructure for that level of abstraction wasn't really there yet back in 2020. A lot of things weren't there yet. And so I set that project to a side and I joined Uniswap. And Uniswap had just launched the token, they had just launched Uniswap v3, and even at the time, the next horizon for them was going to be a wallet. And so when I interviewed there, I wrote a 7-page homework assignment about my vision for the Uniswap wallet, and surprise, surprise, the pitch was account abstraction and smart contract accounts. And so I went to Uniswap. I was there for 2 years. We built the Uniswap wallet. We actually built an entire smart contract wallet. And a lot of people don't know that because we actually didn't ship it. And after writing the smart contract, we realized it's actually very hard to ship it. You need a lot of supporting infrastructure to relay transactions and to manage the keys and the signers for a smart contract account securely. And we didn't really have the time to build all of that. And so instead, we shipped the best EOA wallet that we could. And I hope many of you have downloaded it. It's awesome. Would highly recommend it. But then earlier this year, I decided to join the Alchemy team to work on what I view as the more fundamental problems that are really holding back apps and wallets. I think wallet UX is too hard. We talk about this all the time. But crypto just isn't accessible enough. And the reason why is because of wallets. To use a wallet today, you need to have a seed phrase, you need to back it up in your sock drawer, and you need to jump through a bunch of hoops to get your fiat money on chain before you can even use the application in the first place. And I don't know if anyone here has ever used like Instagram, but I certainly would not have paid $50 to use that for the first time before I'd seen the value click in my head. And so that's why I joined Alchemy, and that's why we're working on account abstraction products to make wallets easier for everybody and hopefully bring a lot more users into Web3.
That's awesome. I love that journey of actually working on account abstraction till like just so much before then 4337, the experiments which you kind of talk about with the safe and trying to set up that relay system and then the journey at Uniswap. So that's super interesting, and I want to just go deeper on a few things. But before I kind of go that way, the topic of today really is building mainstream Web3 with account abstraction, right? So account abstraction, I definitely want to deep dive, but before I do that, I just want to kind of shift towards mainstream Web3. And my question there really is that, imagine a world where Web3 is mainstream. I don't know, 2030, 2040, 2025, I don't know when, but let's just say 2030, Web3 is mainstream. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What are people doing in this mainstream Web3 world? Let's just try defining that.
Great question, and a tough one to answer, so let me try to walk through a few different components of it. I think first, when we say mainstream, we mean almost everyone is using it. right? The internet is a great analog here. Everyone here has used it 1,000 times today, and they probably didn't even think about it. And to me, that's the indicator of being mainstream, is it's sufficiently invisible that it looks like magic, right? And so in a lot of ways, crypto won't look like anything. Rather, people will be doing crypto in the background, and they probably won't even know it. But the types of behaviors that I think it can facilitate and improve are, one, obviously finance. At a Circle conference, that goes without saying, but people will be not only investing, but also spending, right? Because ultimately, blockchain technology is about lowering barriers to entry and barriers between interoperability, right? And if you guys think back like 20 years ago, even 40 years ago before credit cards, right? You all had to pay with cash. The barrier to spend some money or exchange some value with someone else on this planet was about this high. And then we shipped credit cards, and the barrier came down to here. And then we launched the internet, and then we had Stripe, right? And crypto is still floating somewhere up above there. It's still harder than credit cards. But by 2030, by 2040, that will completely change. Crypto will become even easier to use and facilitate the exchange of value, not only in finance use cases, but in social use cases and in gaming and in a bunch of other ways that we can't even imagine yet. And I think that's super powerful because exchange is not just a financial thing. It's actually a very human thing. Think about right now, we're here exchanging ideas, right? I've exchanged food. I got a haircut yesterday. And so it's going to come out to play in a lot of different places in life. And making those rails more invisible and seamless and interoperable will help a lot.
That's super interesting. So, like this, how do you envision people will be exchanging different things in the blockchain during that time? What's that? Like, just almost thinking about what that average day for a person is going to be like how they're experiencing the blockchain, like you said, how are they exchanging things on the blockchain? Like, what does that look and feel like an average day for Will in 2030?
I don't know. I mean, I think it looks and feels like almost like a normal day, and people aren't going to feel the crypto part of it. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. It's definitely what you said, that I think crypto will be a back-end revolution in the sense that it'll be completely invisible from the end user. Yeah. I think it'll probably share a lot of the same, I guess, like properties of how internet scaled, which essentially for blockchain would probably mean that everything that we, like accessing anything on chain would probably happen from all the devices, et cetera, which people are at, and it's not going to be something net new that they have to do. So yeah, I think the average day part of what people will be doing is the harder question to kind of know, obviously.
I think one very interesting way this can play out is by automating and allowing bots and AI agents, but even just other computer programs to exchange things on my behalf. I think that's really the biggest unlock with crypto is you make money exchange and even information more programmable. And so over time, we'll be able to delegate more of these like actions, chores. Maybe it's ordering food, maybe it's buying groceries, maybe it's even smaller things like turning on the lights or driving my car. Last week, I talked to a very cool startup called Demo. If anyone's heard of them, they've been building out smart car technology that you can plug into any car. And that car has a wallet, believe it or not. And as you drive, I think you earn miles, and you can exchange data with other cars, information about what's happening on the road. If there's a pothole here, there's a police car there. And that information gets exchanged through a decentralized Demo network that leverages the blockchain. And I think, to me, it's a very interesting example of ways where you can start to delegate and facilitate the exchange of not just financial assets like we talk about all the time, but really any information in the real world. By creating a decentralized network, a blockchain, you create a platform for different entities and agents to communicate on. And so maybe the Demo network will become that for cars, right? I don't know. We're going to see a lot of experiments try and fail. But I sort of view blockchains as a coordination layer. And when you can use account abstraction is a door for people to participate in that coordination layer.
Yep. That's super interesting. I probably after this conversation want to think this through. I've never thought through about how like, I always, when I thought about wallets and changing, it's always been like people holding wallets and then initiating. But this concept of cars having wallet is really interesting, and that really kind of plays out the whole thesis around how blockchain makes coordination a lot more automated and easier. So
absolutely. And then you can take it a step further, and every AI bot will have a wallet.
Yep.
And you can give permission to a bot to spend some amount of money every day or hour or for specific tasks. And you'll use programmable rules on chain to control and dictate what the AI bot does, so that if it turns evil, it can't spend all your money.
Yep, super interesting. Okay, now let's, just a quick show of hands, like how many people here have heard about account abstraction? Okay, so how many of you actually know how like a user op works and are familiar with how some of that happens? Okay, so quite a few too, okay. So as you said, like account abstraction is probably not something new. Smart contract accounts have been here for a long time. It's definitely gotten a lot of attention over the last 6 months. So how about we just go about, just for the audience, just like recapping what account abstraction is. Like, why is it now suddenly such a popular thing despite it being around for a couple of years? And let's just take it from there.
Great question. Account abstraction has been around as long as Ethereum has. If anyone here attended ETHCC in Paris this year, you might have seen Vitalik give a talk about the 6 different versions of account abstraction that he's tried to build since the birth of Ethereum. And so we're excited to finally have like a viable implementation and design for it that has kind of consensus from the community. But I think the best way to define it is actually to start with the problems and like the meaning of the word account today. So what is an account in the context of a blockchain? Every account on an Ethereum-based chain is what we call an EOA, or an externally owned account. And really what that means is the account is controlled externally by you with your seed phrase. And that seed phrase can sign any transaction, and that's the only way to sign transactions, is using that seed phrase and that particular implementation on Ethereum. And that's great because that's been a common standard for everyone to build on. And that's given rise to a diverse spectrum of wallets like MetaMask and Fireblocks and Uniswap wallet. But the problem with that is it's quite limiting. That means that's the only way for you to onboard and to use crypto. You have to have a seed phrase, and you have to pay gas, and you have to download some kind of extension or app to custody that seed phrase securely. And so the goal behind account abstraction is to relax all of those requirements by converting all of these accounts into smart contract accounts that can support programmable rules to handle all of the functionality that we just talked about in more customizable and programmable ways. And so the result of doing that is that you can now start to build experiences as a developer with custom versions of authentication and of security models. You can start to abstract away gas from the user, for example, by paying gas with a USDC token instead of with Ethereum, or even by sponsoring gas entirely so that the user doesn't have to think about it. And so that's sort of the consumer definition. That's how I would explain account abstraction to someone who's thinking about using it, integrating, is it removes all the barriers to entry for a new user to come on chain. Because that's really our goal. We need to get to 1 billion users on chain, and to do that, the on-ramp has to be super smooth. And it can't involve any technical jargon or explanation at all. For a quick developer answer, what is account abstraction? We talked a bit about this move to smart contract accounts. One of the pieces there is allowing for custom or arbitrary signing methods. And so people have probably heard about the R1 curve and the K1 curve. I always mix these up, but Ethereum uses the R1 curve, I believe. And all of your K1, thank you. This is why he's here. And all of your iPhones and Android devices support the R1 curve. And so a really cool use case that we're excited about in account abstraction is the ability to use Face ID or your fingerprint scanner on your Android phone to sign transactions on chain. And account abstraction is paving the way to make that possible with programmable smart contract accounts that can validate signatures from the R1 curve. So that's just another cool example. But concretely today, how are we solving for account abstraction? It's a thing called ERC 4337. Is a standard written by the Ethereum Foundation and Vitalik, defining just a community standard and design for how everybody can participate in this ecosystem and infrastructure for account abstraction. And that includes, I'd say, 4 key components that I'll just summarize briefly for folks. The first one is a smart contract account. Every user gets a smart contract account instead of an externally owned account. The second piece is a bundler. A bundler is off-chain infrastructure, very similar to a node. So at Alchemy, for example, we've built a bundler. It's highly performant, reliable, scalable. Talk to me about it afterwards if you want to use it. But the function of a bundler is to submit user operations from a smart contract account on-chain. And so whereas an EOA wallet would send a transaction to a node and land on-chain, now you're going to have a smart contract account that will send a user operation to a bundler, and it will land on-chain. So the landing on-chain part leads us to the final 2 components of account abstraction. Number 3 here is you have to pay gas. After you send from the smart contract account to a bundler, you have to pay gas. And so 4337 introduces the concept of a paymaster or a gas manager to sponsor gas. And these are also programmable. You can program a paymaster to do anything you want. For example, pay gas in USDC instead of ETH. Or you can sponsor gas using a bank account or credit card to pay gas so that the user doesn't have to. And then the 4th and final component is what we call the entry point contract. There is one entry point contract on the whole chain for the community to use. It's an adopted standard. And that is the entry point for all user operations to go through and land on chain.
That's awesome. I mean, shout out to Alchemy has a bunch of very good content around this on their website. So it's been a nice way to kind of learn about what account abstraction is. So we should definitely check out that. Okay, so I think that was a pretty good definition, and I loved how you kind of did it from a customer standpoint or like an end user standpoint as well as a developer standpoint. I also want to kind of like maybe keep the same heuristic and move more on the application side, right? As we talk about crypto being mainstream, obviously we need a lot more applications. And maybe let's just start with a couple of applications which I guess today are the closest to mainstream. Probably DeFi and NFTs, according to me, unless you have something else too. And want to just like, I know you worked at Uniswap, so you've seen DeFi up pretty close. And now with Alchemy, you're probably working with a lot of people trying to build better experiences with DeFi. Just curious, like from making DeFi more mainstream to that 2030, 2040 vision that we have, what are some of the things which are not possible today, or what are some of the challenges as we try to get DeFi more mainstream?
I think to answer that question, I'd refer to a great blog post from earlier this year written by Vitalik titled The 3 Transitions. I'd recommend everyone take a read on it. Vitalik says that for Ethereum to go mainstream, we need to go through 3 transitions as an ecosystem. The first transition is the smart contract transition, and that is account abstraction and everything that we just talked about to simplify wallet UX and onboarding, because without that transition, onboarding is too complex in the first place. The second transition is scaling. We need layer 2 networks to lower the cost of transactions and reduce the cost of operations if we want use cases like DeFi to take off and other use cases too. And then the third is the privacy transition. And that's where all of our zero knowledge friends are working hard to keep blockchains private and give you more control over your data. So I think those are at a high level are the 3 things. And then the 4th sort of pillar, I think it's actually emerging from these 3, is we need better use cases, right? We need things that are more fun, more useful, and more interesting, right? And that's why I brought up the demo example. Is that something very novel and clever that probably wasn't possible 5 years ago, but maybe is now because we've been making progress on all 3 of those transitions, right? I think another interesting question to ask is, why has DeFi taken off more than other use cases? And I think for me, there's 2 reasons there. One is just economics, right? If it costs $4 to transact on chain, it better be worth it. And DeFi, as well as NFT speculation last year, not this year, was worthwhile, right? And so that made it unique and helped it take off, whereas other use cases like, say, Web3 social have seen less success until recently with Friendtech, which is, of course, on a layer 2 network, right? But one of the other reasons that it's taken off is because finance is inherently interoperable, right? Crypto is built upon composability. And to really tap into that leverage, you need use cases that are composable. And the most composable thing on the planet is the US dollar. And that's why Circle is such a powerful component. And I think that's why DeFi has taken off, is because it benefits more than almost any other use case from interoperability, from the ability to take my dollars on this platform, move it to this platform, go lend it over here. Other use cases just derive far less value from that because the building blocks of that are inherently less composable. Like, we talk a lot about wallets in Web3 games, so that you can take items from this game to that game. But you really don't want to take a sword from RuneScape and bring it to Call of Duty. It's not going to be very helpful, and the developers don't support it. So DeFi has solved that problem too.
Yeah, that's a great point on how, like, the composability part of DeFi has kind of made it more mainstream than before. I do want to also, like, just double down here and kind of think about, like, today, the way where DeFi stands, there's still a lot of friction for an average user or a mainstream user to kind of do that, to interact with DeFi, right? Like, I think there is a lot of value in DeFi. That's why we have so many people using it, but it's still very limited to folks who can figure a bunch of these things out. So I'm just curious, taking the end user or like the end customer's point of view, which is like, what are some of these frictions which, if they go away, this can actually, like, DeFi can actually be something like what my mom or dad can actually start using too?
Yeah, totally. I think the biggest frictions, they start with onboarding and then they end with checkout, and we can walk through those. So first, for onboarding, you have to download an extension and write down your seed phrase. And we need to solve that. And that's why we're working on account abstraction. And all the MPC wallets folks have heard about recently is because it allows you to create a wallet and secure your funds with an email and a password or a social login. And that's something that mainstream users actually understand. And so you've started to see apps more recently start to adopt this. Like Friendtech is another example where you create a wallet with Twitter and most people never look back, right? And so we need to get to that level of seamless onboarding for every crypto app. The second step is paying for transactions. We mentioned this earlier, but if you're new to crypto and you're just kind of curious about this app you heard about from a friend, when you hit a barrier that says you have to, like, put in your credit card, you have to buy $30, there's a 4% fee, it's going to take an hour to arrive, you kind of give up, right? That's a huge hurdle in the onboarding process. And so we need to solve that one. And I think that's where I'm really excited about some of the work Circle is doing to help users get their US dollars on chain more easily, because it's a really important part.
Got it. I mean, just to play a bit of a devil's advocate there, like, the first part really doesn't need account abstraction. Like, the key management part is probably pretty well solved with MPC, right? So the onboarding part today is pretty well solved with a bunch of these MPC providers which are out there, right? The transaction experience, I agree, especially the gas part of it. Anything else apart from that? Like, do you think what's possible today with DeFi, like, the one thing which maybe I think a lot about is, like, how something as simple as, like, pull payments, right? Like, I mean, USDC is there. We're trying to make it the best money protocol in the world. But when you actually look at something as simple as, like, a subscription payment, that's pretty complex to kind of do today. And that's a very simple use case which all of us kind of look at. So just curious, like, what are some of these, like, very obvious DeFi-centric use cases that you think become possible with account abstraction, some of the things there?
Pull payments is a perfect example. Or subscriptions. With a smart contract account, you can very easily create a subscription by imprinting a programmable rule on your account that lets, say, Netflix withdraw up to $16 exactly once a month from my smart account. And that can run for 12 months. That could run in perpetuity until you cancel it. And that's a superpower that smart contract accounts have through account abstraction. A second one is account recovery, right? You can start to program in different recovery methods on your smart contract account. And I think that's a very important thing to have in this world where we start to rely on MPC providers to custody keys. I think MPC technology is a great way to custody, but it often makes some assumptions, right, on the partner that the MPC provider is staying live, that they're not censoring your transactions. And in many cases, too, they ask the user to remember a password or store an encrypted backup of the user's key share in case it gets lost. And so even with the MPC providers, there are still a number of scenarios where you could lose access to your account. And that's why I think it's really helpful to have a smart contract account with a recovery component, because you can have a second authority. It could be your email. It could be a different MPC provider. It could be a hardware wallet that you keep in your drawer only for disaster scenarios. And that second provider can have the ability to recover your account. A third very cool use case for smart contract accounts, you asked for some, I'm going to give you a lot, are session keys. And so typically, like when you interact with an app, you have to sign every single transaction, right? And if you're doing something like playing a game, that's a major pain, right? If you imagine you have to pay some gas for every move that you make or every item you buy, it would be unusable, right? But with session keys, you can grant a set of permissions to the application when you connect. And you can define those permissions however you like. So you could connect to a game and allow it to spend $50. Or you could let it submit up to 20 transactions of this particular type with parameters no greater than this. And so smart contract accounts, because they're programmable, they actually give you much more control and flexibility over how and when your money is spent. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of a wallet is to give you control over your assets in a self-custodial manner. And right now, we're at the simplest possible version of that, where anytime my wallet wants to do something, it asks me. And I appreciate that, but I kind of wish it would know sometimes that it should just go ahead and approve that, and it doesn't have to bother me. So when you can program that into smart contract accounts, you start to remove that friction from every little thing you do on-chain, and on-chain transactions can start to fade a little more into the background. And that's a very important step towards the mainstream adoption.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think like the programmability part of it, as well as like this mental model of having multiple keys instead of like the one key, which we have in EOA to do everything, is so powerful. And once you kind of have those multiple keys, like a recovery key, as you said, a session key, a signing key, and then have them do different things, it just makes it so much more powerful at an account or a wallet level. Okay, I think we have a few minutes, but so I want to quickly get your answer on this. Like, you're at Alchemy, so I have to ask you, and you're working on account abstraction. Is the infra ready? Like, we always battle about apps and infra with respect to crypto. Is the infra for account abstraction there yet?
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, absolutely, yes. Over 2 million user operations have already been mined on chain. Account abstraction has been live for 4 or 5 months now. The infrastructure that we provide at Alchemy and also elsewhere in the market is ready to go, right? And it's particularly at Alchemy. We have a team of 11 or 12 engineers working on this. We run all of our bundler and paymaster infrastructure alongside our fleet of nodes, which are the most reliable in the industry. We've spent a lot of time with the layer 2 teams and with the Ethereum Foundation working on this infrastructure to make sure it plays nicely with their sequencers. We're still learning new things, and the infra is still evolving. For example, we're working right now on the peer-to-peer mempool. Today, every bundler is isolated. You send it to the bundler, and it puts it on chain. But in the next 3 to 6 months, the community will be connecting all of these bundlers together into a network of bundlers. And they will broadcast user ops to each other and create a mempool of user ops, just like nodes have a mempool today. So the infrastructure is still growing to add that layer of decentralization so that if one bundler goes down, your user ops still get mined. But it's absolutely ready. We've seen already super high load. For example, last month, Alchemy powered the airdrop on CyberConnect, which is a Web3 social network, and so far the biggest user of account abstraction across Polygon, Optimism, and Base. We powered over 200,000 user ops with many cases peak loads where the Alchemy bundler was filling up an entire block on Optimism. We would be submitting bundles worth 15 million gas because all of these users were aping in to claim their airdrop. So it's definitely been battle tested and the infra is ready to go.
That's awesome. Okay. I want to end it. I know we are out of time, but I'll just take a minute more and want to end it with a rapid fire of a few questions to you. So, favorite AA wallet right now?
Beam. Beam.eco is a payments app. It's the smoothest wallet experience I've seen so far. You create an account with Twitter, and they give you some eco right off the bat, and you can pay gas with your eco token, and I can send you money in seconds.
That's awesome. What year would user ops from smart contract accounts tip transactions from EOAs?
2025. And the reason why is because I believe that in the next bull run, in the next cycle, whenever it may come, I'm hoping it's next year, that's part of my prediction. I believe that every user onboarding during that cycle will onboard to a smart contract account. And it's because it's going to be so much easier for them to onboard there than it will to an EOA. And the apps that take off and get the headlines on TechCrunch and the Wall Street Journal and the apps that your mom texts you about, they will be using smart contract accounts because they will go viral and they will be a lot easier for people to onboard to.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to that 2024 bull run. Okay, native account abstraction on Ethereum. Will it happen or not? If yes, when?
It will, yes. On Ethereum L1 mainnet, I think it's probably 2027 is my honest guess. I think right now it's late 2023. We talked about this a little bit, again, at ETHCC. We hosted a sort of account abstraction roundtable with the community members. Many teams, some who may be here today, working on account abstraction, and we talked about the path to native account abstraction as well as an intermediate step for an EIP to upgrade EOAs to smart contract accounts. That EIP, I'm optimistic, would come in the next year and a half. And that would really help with the transition. Because right now, if you want to move to a smart contract account, you need to literally transfer your assets. So I think we'll see that EIP in the next year and a half, and then native AA in 2027.
Love that. Okay, this is important for us. When do you think USDC will be the gas token of the blockchain?
Q1?
Hope so. I need to tell Jonathan, my friend, that I was working
let's do
on
it.
that. Yeah.
With an ERC20 Paymaster, we could set that up in no time.
Of course, we're very excited about that for USDC being the gas token of the blockchain. Definitely something which is very exciting for us.
Just to double click on that, I know this is rapid fire, but just the fact that people have to buy ETH to use the blockchain today is a problem. Everybody knows what the US dollar is, and very few people know what Ethereum is. So USDC Paymasters will be a big deal.
Yep. Hopefully. Okay, last question. Infra or apps? Do we need more infra or do we need more apps? Tough one as Alchemy.
Can I say both? This feels like one of those false choices. I think we need both. I do think if anyone here has read that excellent blog post about the infrastructure and the app lifecycle throughout industries, I think right now, I describe our infrastructure work, particularly with account abstraction, as necessary but not sufficient. Right? We need this infrastructure work to lower barriers to entry, make it easier for users to create wallets, easier for developers to build apps. It's absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so it's the interplay of those two things. It's infrastructure making it easier and lowering barriers that enables application developers to go and invent these new use cases, and for those use cases to work. I think Friendtech, again, is a perfect example. 3 years ago, Friendtech would not have worked with MetaMask login and layer 1 gas fees. right? But today, it's actually starting to work. I don't know where it will go long term, no predictions here, but it works because it has social login and very low gas fees.
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't read that article, like the myth of the infrastructure phase, highly recommended. It's one of my favorite articles about crypto. Thank you so much, Will. This was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for staying here.
Thank you.